My beloved child, God says. Don't scroll. If this message found you today, it wasn't an accident. Stay until the end because God has something He wants you to hear. There is a promise your soulmate made that you may know nothing about, a promise spoken from a place of deep emotion, fear, and desperation. It was not made casually. It was not made because they wanted attention. It was made during a moment when their heart was overwhelmed, when they were facing something they could not control, and when your name entered their thoughts in a way they could not ignore. My child, there are moments when people discover what truly matters to them only when everything else is stripped away. When life becomes uncertain, the distractions disappear. Pride becomes less important. Ego becomes less important. Other people's opinions become less important. Suddenly, the heart begins speaking with a clarity that the mind had been avoiding. And your soulmate may have experienced one of those moments. Perhaps there was a time when they were physically weak, emotionally broken, deeply afraid, or facing a situation that made them realize how fragile life can be. In that moment, they remembered you. They remembered your voice. They remembered your kindness. They remembered the way you looked at them. They remembered conversations they once took for granted. They remembered moments they thought were ordinary but later realized were precious. And somewhere within that emotional storm, they made a promise. A promise connected to you. A promise they may have never told you because they were afraid you would not believe them, afraid you would reject them, or afraid that admitting the truth would expose just how deeply they still cared. My child, sometimes a person can hide their feelings from everyone except themselves. They can tell friends that they are fine. They can smile in public. They can pretend that the past does not matter. They can even convince themselves that they have moved on. But when they are alone with their thoughts, the truth becomes harder to escape. And perhaps that is exactly what happened to your soulmate. There was a moment when they realized that if they were given another opportunity, they would do things differently. They would speak more honestly. They would stop allowing fear to control their choices. They would tell you what they should have told you long ago. They would not waste another opportunity to show you what you mean to them. My child, you may have thought their silence meant they forgot you. You may have thought the distance meant they no longer cared. You may have wondered whether someone else had taken your place. But there are situations where silence is not the absence of feeling. Sometimes silence is the result of feelings that are too complicated to express. Your soulmate may have been carrying regret. They may have been carrying guilt. They may have been replaying memories and wondering how everything became so complicated. They may have asked themselves why they pushed away someone who genuinely cared. Why they allowed circumstances to interfere. Why they listened to fear. Why They allowed pride to speak louder than their heart. And perhaps the most painful question they have asked themselves is this: what if I had chosen differently? My child, that question can stay inside a person's mind for a very long time. What if I had called? What if I had stayed? What if I had told the truth? What if I had apologized sooner? What if I had not allowed someone else's opinion to influence me? What if I had fought for the connection instead of running from it? Your soulmate may have been asking these questions quietly. And there may have been a moment when the possibility of losing you permanently became real to them. That is when the promise was made. They may have promised themselves that if life gave them another chance, they would not repeat the same mistake. They may have promised that they would find you again. They may have promised that they would tell you the truth. They may have promised that if they ever stood in front of you again, they would not hide behind pride. And my child, that promise may still be alive inside them. But I want you to understand something important. A promise is powerful, but a promise is not the same as action. Your soulmate may have made a sincere promise in a deeply emotional moment, but they still have to become strong enough to fulfill it. That is the journey they are facing now. The question is no longer whether they care. The question is whether they are willing to act with courage. Whether they are willing to confront what happened. Whether they are willing to accept responsibility. Whether they are willing to rebuild trust. And whether they are willing to approach you without expecting you to forget everything that happened. My child, you have been through your own transformation too. You are not standing where you stood before. You have cried. You have questioned. You have waited. You have experienced moments when you thought the connection was over. You may have tried to release the attachment. You may have told yourself that you had to move forward. And perhaps you have genuinely begun moving forward. But sometimes moving forward does not mean forgetting someone. It means learning how to carry the memory without allowing it to control your life. And that is what I want for you. Do not stop living because of a promise another person made. Do not pause your future waiting for someone to fulfill words spoken in the past. Keep growing. Keep healing. Keep becoming stronger. If your soulmate is truly meant to return, they will have to meet you where you are now, not where you were when they left. And my child, there is something about that promise you may not have considered. Your soulmate may not have made it simply because they wanted you back. They may have made it because they finally understood what you represented in their life. You may have represented peace during a chaotic season. You may have been the person who believed in them when they did not believe in themselves. You may have been the person who saw their potential beneath their mistakes. You may have given them a kind of emotional safety they did not appreciate until it was gone. And sometimes a person does not recognize the value of peace until they experience chaos. They do not recognize the value of genuine love until they encounter relationships built on convenience. They do not recognize the value of honesty until they experience deception. Your soulmate may have learned these lessons through experience. And those lessons may have brought them back to the memory of you. They may have realized that what they once considered ordinary was actually rare. Your patience was rare. Your loyalty was rare. Your ability to understand them was rare. The way you cared without demanding perfection was rare. And perhaps now they understand that. My child, there is a reason certain people remain unforgettable. It is not always because the relationship lasted forever. Sometimes it is because the connection revealed something that changed a person permanently. You may have changed your soulmate in ways they never admitted. Perhaps you challenged them to become more honest. Perhaps you showed them what vulnerability felt like. Perhaps you made them realize they were capable of loving more deeply than they thought. And when a person experiences that, walking away does not erase it. Time does not necessarily erase it. Distance does not necessarily erase it. Sometimes it becomes part of who they are. This may be why your soulmate made that promise. They may have reached a moment when they realized that if they ever had the opportunity to make things right, they wanted to take it. But fear may still be standing between the promise and the action. They may wonder whether you still care. They may wonder whether you would even listen. They may wonder whether you have already found someone else. They may wonder whether you would forgive them. They may wonder whether they deserve another chance. And that last question may be the hardest one. Because deep inside, they may know that they hurt you. They may know they disappeared when they should have stayed. They may know they failed to communicate. They may know that some of your tears were connected to their choices. And now they may be afraid that an apology cannot repair what happened. But my child, sometimes the first step toward restoration is simply telling the truth. They cannot change the past, but they can take responsibility for it. They cannot erase every wound, but they can stop creating new ones. They cannot force you to trust them, but they can become trustworthy. They cannot demand another chance, but they can show through their actions that they are ready to earn one. And this is where your discernment becomes important. If they return, do not only listen to the emotional words. Watch what happens afterward. Do they remain consistent? Do they communicate? Do they respect your boundaries? Do they show patience? Do they take responsibility? Do they make an effort even when there is no immediate reward? That is how you will know whether the promise was merely emotional or whether it has become a genuine commitment. My child, I want you to release the need to know exactly when they will return. Timing is not something you need to control. You do. Not need to calculate days. You do not need to search for signs every hour. You do not need to chase messages or create situations just to see whether they react. Let things unfold naturally. If there is a conversation that needs to happen, it will happen through a real opportunity. If there is an apology that needs to be spoken, it will eventually require a voice. If there is a promise that needs to be fulfilled, it will require action. And if there is no action, then you have your answer. 2. My child, I never want you to confuse hope with waiting endlessly. Hope can coexist with movement. You can believe that something beautiful may happen while continuing to build a beautiful life now. You can care about someone without allowing them to become the center of your existence. You can leave the door open without standing at the door all day. And perhaps that is exactly what your soulmate needs to see. They need to understand that your life did not stop because they left. They need to see that you have grown. They need to realize that if they want to return, they cannot return with the same behavior. The old version of the relationship cannot simply be restarted. Something new must be built. Something healthier. Something more honest. Something based on mutual effort rather than one person constantly chasing and the other constantly withdrawing. My child, the promise made from that hospital bed, or from that vulnerable moment, may have been connected to a realization that life is precious. Perhaps your soulmate suddenly understood that there are no guarantees. Perhaps they realized that tomorrow is not promised. Perhaps they recognized that they had spent too much time postponing the words that mattered. And maybe that is why your memory became so powerful. Because when people face uncertainty, they often remember the person who made them feel something real. They remember unfinished conversations. They remember the person they should have appreciated more. They remember the person they would want beside them if everything else disappeared. And perhaps your soulmate saw you in that emotional picture. They may have thought, if I get another chance, I will tell them. If I get another chance, I will apologize. If I get another chance, I will not run. If I get another chance, I will finally tell them how much they meant to me. My child, those words may have been spoken quietly, perhaps even only inside their own mind, but they can reveal something about the emotional journey they have been experiencing. Yet I want you to remain grounded. A powerful story can inspire hope, but your real life should be guided by reality, wisdom, and healthy choices. Do not assume that every coincidence means your soulmate is returning. Do not assume every dream is a prediction. Do not allow fear or excitement to make decisions for you. When something real happens, you will be able to respond to the real event. Until then, live your life. Protect your peace. Keep your heart soft without leaving it unprotected. And my child, there is one more thing about this promise that you need to hear. Your soulmate may have promised not only to return to you, but to become a different person before returning. They may have realized that they could not approach you carrying the same emotional patterns that caused the separation. They may have known that if they returned without changing, they would only hurt you again. And perhaps that is why the process has taken longer than you expected. Perhaps the delay has been connected to growth. Not the kind of growth that can be announced in a message, but the kind that happens privately. The kind that forces a person to examine their behavior. The kind that makes them confront their fears. The kind that teaches them accountability. The kind that changes the way they understand love. My child, if your soulmate truly wants another chance, they must learn that love is not only about feelings. Love is communication. Love is consistency. Love is patience. Love is honesty. Love is accountability. Love is choosing each other even when the excitement fades. And perhaps the promise they made was the beginning of that lesson. Maybe they are now realizing that the person they want to return to deserves more than a dramatic confession. You deserve stability. You deserve respect. You deserve clarity. You deserve someone who does not make you question your worth every day. And if they cannot provide that, then their promise cannot become your prison. Let them prove themselves through action. Let them show you who they have become. And you, my child, keep becoming everything you were created to be. Because whether your soulmate returns tomorrow, months from now, or never returns at all, your life still carries purpose. Your future still carries possibility. Your story is still being written. And perhaps the greatest surprise is that the promise they made about you may not be the end of their story. It may be the beginning of a decision they have been afraid to make. A decision that will force them to finally face the truth they have carried silently for so long. And when that truth finally reaches you, you will understand why this message found you today. My child, now listen even more closely, because the promise your soulmate made was not simply about returning to your life. There was something deeper behind those words, something connected to the fear they felt when they realized that they could actually lose you forever. They may have looked strong from the outside, but inside they were confronting a reality they had avoided for a long time. They realized that there are some people you can walk away from and never think about again, but there are other people whose absence follows you into every quiet room. Your soulmate may have discovered that you were one of those people. They could continue their daily routine, speak with others, laugh, work, travel, and appear completely normal, yet there would still be moments when your memory suddenly returned. And each time it returned, they may have asked themselves the same question: why am I still thinking about this person? Why does this connection still affect me? Why do I still wish I could go back and change certain things? My Child, those questions can become impossible to ignore when a person finally becomes honest with themselves. Your soulmate may have tried to convince themselves that what they felt was only nostalgia. They may have told themselves that they simply missed the familiar. They may have believed that time would eventually erase everything. But instead of disappearing, the memories may have become reminders of what they failed to appreciate. They may remember the smallest things about you. The way you spoke. The way you reacted when you were excited. The way you became quiet when something hurt you. The way you tried to understand them even when they were difficult to understand. The way you gave them chances. The way you believed in them. And perhaps the most painful memory is the moment when they realized they had taken your presence for granted. My child, sometimes a person does not understand the value of a blessing while holding it. They understand it when the blessing is no longer within reach. Your soulmate may have learned that lesson in a difficult way. They may have discovered that not every connection can be replaced simply because another person appears. You can meet someone new and still miss someone from your past. You can receive attention from others and still remember the person who made you feel truly understood. You can surround yourself with people and still feel the absence of one particular person. And perhaps that is what has been happening inside your soulmate. They may have been searching for the feeling they experienced with you in places where it could not be found. My child, I want you to understand that this does not mean you should chase them. It means you should recognize the difference between your value and their readiness. Your value was never determined by whether they were mature enough to appreciate you. Your value existed before they recognized it. Your worth does not increase because they return, and it does not decrease because they remain silent. You are still worthy of honesty. You are still worthy of respect. You are still worthy of someone who chooses you without making you beg for basic communication. And if your soulmate truly wants to fulfill the promise they once made, they will eventually understand that they cannot simply return with words. They must return with evidence. They must return with maturity. They must return willing to answer the questions they once avoided. They must be willing to explain why they left. They must be willing to acknowledge what their actions caused. They must be willing to listen to the pain you experienced without becoming defensive. My child, this is where many connections fail. People return because they miss each other, but they do not repair what broke them apart. They restart the relationship without healing the pattern, and eventually the same problems return. I do not want you to settle for a temporary reunion that eventually creates another painful separation. If your soulmate comes back, let the return be different. Let it be slower. Let it be more honest. Let it be based on understanding instead of emotional urgency. Let both of you have conversations that should have happened long ago. Let there be Accountability. Let there be patience. Let there be forgiveness without pretending the past never happened. My child, forgiveness does not mean you must forget. Forgiveness means you release the burden of carrying anger while still allowing wisdom to guide your boundaries. You can forgive someone and still require them to prove that they have changed. You can love someone and still say, "I need consistency." You can care deeply and still refuse to accept disrespect. This is the maturity I am building within you. You are not the same person who once waited for every notification, every call, every sign. You have learned how painful uncertainty can become. You have learned that constantly wondering where you stand with someone can drain your spirit. And now you are learning to choose peace. Your soulmate may notice this difference if they return. They may expect you to be exactly as you were before. They may expect the same immediate emotional reaction. They may expect you to welcome them without questions. But my child, you have every right to pause. You have every right to listen carefully. You have every right to protect the progress you have made. If their intentions are genuine, they will understand. If they truly made that promise from the deepest place within their heart, they will not become angry because you need time. They will not pressure you to forget. They will not demand immediate trust. They will understand that trust must be rebuilt. And perhaps this is one of the reasons they have remained silent for so long. They may know that returning means facing everything they avoided. They may know that one message could open a conversation they cannot control. They may know that if they finally reach out, they cannot simply disappear again. And that realization may frighten them. But my child, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing truth even while fear is present. Your soulmate may be standing at that exact crossroads. They may be asking themselves whether they are brave enough to fulfill what they once promised. They may be wondering whether the time has finally come. And perhaps there have already been moments when they almost reached out. They typed something and deleted it. They opened your profile and closed it. They considered calling and stopped themselves. They imagined what they would say and then convinced themselves to wait. They may have written words that never reached you. They may have rehearsed an apology privately. They may have imagined your reaction 100 different ways. My child, people sometimes delay communication because they are trying to control the outcome before taking the first step. They want to know whether they will be forgiven before they apologize. They want to know whether they will be welcomed before they return. They want to know whether you still care before admitting that they care. But life does not always provide those guarantees. At some point, they will have to take the risk of honesty. And if they truly want to fulfill their promise, they will understand that they cannot wait for perfect certainty. They must act with integrity. My child, You may soon notice something changing in the way this person approaches the idea of you. Perhaps they will become less defensive when your name is mentioned. Perhaps they will stop pretending that the past means nothing. Perhaps they will begin asking mutual connections about you. Perhaps they will quietly try to understand where you are in life now. Perhaps they will become curious about whether you have moved on. But do not become consumed by these possibilities. Let life reveal what is real. You do not need to investigate every detail. You do not need to ask other people about them. You do not need to create a situation to force a reaction. If there is something meant to be communicated, let the communication happen naturally. My child, your peace is more important than your curiosity. Never trade your peace for temporary information. And there is another truth you need to hear. Your soulmate may have made that promise during a moment of fear, but fear can sometimes reveal what the heart values most. When everything else becomes uncertain, the heart often reaches for what feels genuine. They may have thought of you because you represented something they could not easily replace. Maybe you represented home. Maybe you represented acceptance. Maybe you represented a future they once imagined. Maybe you represented the person they wanted to become better. 4. And perhaps they realized that they had been running from the very thing their heart wanted. My child, this is why you should not be surprised if the person who once seemed distant eventually becomes more honest. People change when reality forces them to. Your soulmate may have experienced circumstances that changed their priorities. They may have learned difficult lessons about trust, relationships, family, loyalty, or time. They may have seen situations around them that made them realize how quickly everything can change. And suddenly, the things they once considered important may no longer matter as much. Ego may matter less. Winning an argument may matter less. Looking strong may matter less. Being right may matter less. What matters more is whether the people they love know that they are loved. And that realization may bring them back to you in their thoughts. My child, if they return, let their first goal be truth, not romance. Let them explain. Let them listen. Let them acknowledge. Let them demonstrate. Romance can come later. Trust must come first. You do not need another beautiful beginning that is built on an unresolved ending. You need something honest. Enough to survive difficult moments. And if they have truly changed, they will understand this. They will not only talk about the future. They will be willing to discuss the past. They will not only tell you what they want. They will ask what you need. They will not only ask you to forgive them. They will show you why forgiveness would be safe. My child, that is how you will recognize genuine transformation. And I want you to know that your healing is not dependent on their apology. Their apology may help, but your healing has already begun. You have already Survived the nights when you thought you would never feel normal again. You have already survived the unanswered questions. You have already survived the moments when you blamed yourself. You have already learned that someone else's inability to love properly does not mean there was something wrong with you. You are becoming wiser because of what you experienced. And that wisdom will protect you in the next chapter. Your soulmate may still be carrying their own lessons, but you do not need to carry them for them. Let them learn. Let them grow. Let them face themselves. Let them decide whether the promise they once made was merely a desperate thought or a commitment they are willing to honor. You cannot make that decision for them. And my child, you should not want to. The most meaningful return is the return someone chooses freely, not one you have forced. If they come back because they genuinely understand your value, there will be strength in that decision. If they come back because they are lonely, the connection will reveal that too. Time will tell. Actions will tell. Consistency will tell. You do not need to guess forever. And perhaps the biggest surprise is that while your soulmate has been thinking about the promise they made, you have been quietly becoming the person who no longer needs that promise to feel secure. That is the transformation I wanted for you. Because when you no longer need someone to choose you, you become capable of recognizing whether they are choosing you for the right reasons. You stop accepting crumbs. You stop confusing attention with commitment. You stop interpreting temporary intensity as permanent love. You begin asking deeper questions. Is this person honest? Are they consistent? Do they respect me? Do they communicate? Do they take responsibility? Do they bring peace into my life instead of constant uncertainty? My child, these questions matter more than the words, "I miss you." And if your soulmate truly understands the promise they once made, they will eventually understand that loving you means answering these questions through their behavior. So keep your heart open, but keep your eyes open too. Keep hope, but keep wisdom. Keep compassion, but keep boundaries. Do not close yourself to love, but do not abandon yourself for love. The promise may have been made long ago, but what matters now is whether it becomes reality. And something is beginning to shift. The person who once ran from the truth may be getting tired of running. The person who once hid behind silence may be preparing to speak. The person who once believed there would always be another opportunity may finally realize that opportunities are not guaranteed. And that realization may bring them to a moment of decision. They will have to decide whether they will continue living with the weight of what they never said or finally step forward and tell you the truth. My child, when that moment comes, you may be surprised by how calm you feel.